Welcome to another episode of eCom at One, and today's guest is Brie Read. Now, Brie has an e-commerce brand business in the UK, which is just celebrating its second year birthday, and is doing about 3,000 orders a day. So really excited to speak to Brie today about some of the things she's done to build a brand so quickly in the UK. How you doing, Brie?
Doing really well. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Thank you so much. So I think it'd be good to kick off and sort of go straight into really about your career journey. What sort of brought you to where you are now over the last few years?
So my background's really in data. So I'm a complete data nerd and love anything to do with numbers and patterns and how those things work. So my career very much started in analysis and understanding from a kind of a background, marketing and how that all worked. And then suddenly the kind of desire to go, it works so terribly and people don't measure it right. And I'm sure I could do a better job. And then eventually one of my bosses went, if you think you can do such a good job, you run marketing then. And I was like, okay, I will then.
Yes.
Actually did a quite good job of it. And that's kind of how I ended up in marketing rather than staying in data and analysis. And I think it's been a really interesting journey. I've worked for some great brands, the Postcode Lottery that does a huge amount for charity, Diet Chef, worked for Sainsbury's for a while. So, being able to understand how those big companies work, as well as, really kind of gutsy little startups and how that works too.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously seen a lot of things from that sort of smaller businesses to these big brands, but ultimately a lot of what you're sort of focused on has been looking at the data and seeing what you can find within those smaller brands, big brands, etc. And that brings us to today, where you're 2 years in with SNAG Tights. So tell us how SNAG Tights came about.
But I was walking down a street, a really posh street in Edinburgh, and I could feel my tights falling down. And they kind of, you can wriggle them up if they go mid-thigh length, you can kind of pull them up. And at one point they actually went underneath my knees. And at that point you kind of know there's not much that you can do with that. They're going to fall down. So I actually had to take my shoes off, take my tights off, put my shoes back on in the middle of this street, and then kind of look around to see if anybody was watching me. And it turned out that everyone was watching me, and it was one of those super humiliating experiences that you then have to talk to people about. Otherwise you do that thing where you play it back in your head a million times and go, what could I have done differently? So I talked to a lot of people about it, and all my friends of all different heights and sizes, and what came back from them was, none of them liked tights. None of them felt that was something that was good in their lives, and they all had these kind of horrible tights experiences to share. So being the data nerd that I am, I thought I had to understand what this looked like in a kind of more objective context. So I commissioned a kind of representative sample survey from Google of 3,000 women in the UK. And it came back that 90% of them, 90, said that their tights didn't fit. And again, because I'm a data nerd, I knew that the tights market was worth $38 billion. So you've got a $38 billion market, and 90% of users say that the product isn't fit for purpose. I was like, oh, there's probably an opportunity in here somewhere.
There's something in there maybe, Okay. Yeah, so we got the data. We thought there's something there. So what was the next step then? How did you go with that data?
So that was really trying to understand why they didn't fit. So that was, buying every pair of tights I could get my hands on. It was measuring them. It was fitting them on people. I got a really great team of women together who were the kind of fit models to explain what was wrong with the tights for them. We kind of broke it all down, and then we're able to build back up a kind of a new product which fits in all the right ways. And then it was about finding a manufacturer for that product and kind of going from there.
Yeah. Okay. So do you manufacture in the UK, or where are you manufacturing?
We manufacture in Italy, which is the kind of, the tights capital of the world, tights country of the world. But anyway, it's where you go to get really good tights.
Tight city, tight. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did the research. I mean, just finding, I think that people that are listening in, people that are maybe looking at setting up an e-com brand, and they've maybe identified a product set or a set of products. You know, how did you find sort of a supplier and a manufacturer? How would you, what sort of recommendations would you have there for that?
Just takes a lot of work. I think it takes a lot of Googling, you know, a lot of speaking to people, a lot of, you know, picking up the phone. I'm not a particularly, I'm quite an introvert. I don't really like phone calls or anything like that, but you have to
Yeah.
kind of push yourself out there and actually
Sorry,
ask for an
sorry
opinion.
about putting you on Zoom.
No, it's fine. But it's, you know, you do have to push yourself out there and ask
Yeah.
for those recommendations and kind of chase it down, because, you know, it's
Yeah.
not in their interest to facilitate your new product. You know, you need to make a really strong argument to them as
Yeah.
your kind of the first people that believe in you, that
Yeah.
they should work with you, and that your idea is big, and presenting to them, and, you know, being able to convince them is just as important as, you know, trying to convince an investor. You have to put the same amount of effort into it.
Yeah. So blood, sweat, and tears in the short version.
Mhm.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Okay. So I think for the guys that are listening in, obviously 2 years is such a short period, and I think I know I said at the beginning you're doing about 3,000 orders a day.
Yep.
Where would you say in terms of, obviously, I know you're doing quite a few different things. I've had a good look at the obviously the website and some of the Facebook ads library and things like that, and seen some of the things you're doing. So maybe if we kick off with Facebook ads, what sort of things would you say to the guys listening in that have got stores that, you know, you might be able to give them some pointers on Facebook? Because I think Facebook's been quite a big channel for you guys, hasn't it?
Yep, no, it's great. I used to, directly before Snag, I ran a Facebook agency. So Facebook is kind of really close to my heart in terms of a channel. You know, there's lots of great things about it. The first one being that it's accessible to anyone, and, you know, you're just as capable of having an awesome Facebook ad as a huge brand. And
Yeah.
as a tiny brand, I think it really levels the playing field. Facebook is a lot more unstable now than it used to be 6 months ago or a year ago. And I think people are getting a lot less consistent results. And I think in some ways that's all about, you know, treating it as you know, as something that you have to keep testing all of the time. So there's no easy answer. There's no one campaign that you can leave running forever.
Yeah.
You have to keep interrogating it, keep testing it. And I think I spoke to someone recently and they said, you know, build into your mental model of it's instability. And I think that's really key, rather than expecting it to behave in a normal way. If you
Yeah.
expect it to behave in an inconsistent way, it helps you build your approach and your campaigns a lot better.
Okay. Okay. So always, obviously keeping an eye on it all. Sort of obviously some things that were working may not work. So you've got to obviously keep, I see you've got a lot of ads out there, a lot of different ads. You're using a lot of video in your ads. So you get your customers to send in video. Is that the type of thing you do?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Yep. So we do competitions. We get a lot of UGC anyway. We had a little bit of a kind of dearth of videos. We did a big competition asking people to film some videos for us, which is where all the new video ads come from. We got a brilliant response and some completely crazy and creative videos, which are great to have out there. So we try and be as real as possible in all of our advertising. We don't use any models. Everything you see are our actual customers.
Yeah, you can see that really comes across. I think that for me, that obviously looking at your brand, you know, before we jumped on the call, I was taken back by just how I think the great word real, and just very, you know, it just looks very real. You know, a lot of very creative people as well that are sort of sending their videos in, so they're just like, you know, you just sort of stop and have a look, you know. And I found myself spending quite a lot of time looking at all your ads, thinking, it's giving me ideas. You know, I don't sell tights, but obviously, you know, in the agency we have a lot of other products that we do represent. So a lot of inspiration there. So I would recommend anybody that's listening in, you know, to maybe go to the Facebook ads library and have a look at Brie's ads on SNAG Tights. Obviously, you get a feel for the creatives you're doing, the videos you're using, the UGC, the user generated content that's coming in. So so Facebook ads. While we're still on Facebook ads, do you know what your split is around remarketing and sort of new audiences, or did you do a lot of remarketing or?
So we don't do a huge amount. The majority of what we do is around first customer acquisition. I mean, we have a very short purchase journey. So most people buy on their first visit to the website, which I've never seen for any other brand.
Wow.
But it's really nice. And we've got a very high conversion rate on the site as well. So our conversion rate on the site sits at about 10%.
Wow.
So, you know, 1 out of every 10 people that comes to the site buys anyway. So retargeting is a much smaller part of what we do. We also try very much to listen to our customers and what they want. So one of the reasons we don't do email marketing is because no customer has ever asked us to email them, you know, twice weekly with a newsletter. So we don't do that. No customer has also asked us to follow them around the internet with loads of, you know, really strong retargeting. So again, we don't do that. We try and put their needs and their happiness first. And because we consider it a co-owned brand between us and the customers, we take that really seriously.
So what sort of things? So you're very, very customer centric, very brand focused, customer focused, should I say? So what sort of things have you done then, or what sort of things would you recommend that people could do to sort of really push that sort of customer centric brand?
I think the big thing is you firstly have to genuinely mean it. I did a talk quite a while ago now to a group of marketeers, and I was talking about how sizing, acceptance and body positivity are really important in brands, and somebody put their hand up and went, so do we actually have to mean it, or do we just fake it? And I was like, no, you have to mean it. It's like a kind of the key part of it. So again, with being customer centric, I find a lot of brands say they are, but you really have to genuinely mean that. And sometimes that's, you know, fun stuff you think would be awesome, customers aren't that excited about, and that means you don't choose those things. You know, it's like you have to make decisions that are to your detriment sometimes, and that's okay. But for me, the big part of it is to keep those conversations with them live and keep asking them questions. So you know, any decision we have in the business, we put out to our social audiences, and we listen to what they say. Sometimes we did one recently where we asked for kind of new product suggestions, and we got 4,000 comments, which was a lot to read through. But we read through and we answered every single one of them, because that's also our commitment. So if we ask someone to talk to us, then you can't not talk back to them. So, you know, you have to commit the people and the resources to answer every single comment or interaction that you get on social, which is something we do as well.
So social obviously plays a huge part. Posting on there, asking your followers and your brand ambassadors and all the people that are on your pages and have bought your products, etc., and then collating sort of 4,000 comments and making decisions from it. How do you sort of go about that? Or, you know, thousands of bits of feedback.
Well, I mean, I read it all myself, and I go through it and I make notes, and you do little tallies and you see what comes up again, and you know, you make sure that you've got a really good feeling for it. And I think it's also, you know, people are taking time out of their day to share that stuff with you. So, you know, the least you can do is read it properly and understand it and take it on board, and use that when that's a really important tool. It's like, again, you use it when you need the help to make a decision, not just for the sake of it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, understood. So in terms of the sort of technology you're using and platforms, so you have, I think is it Shopify?
Yeah, it's Shopify.
Big fan?
Huge fan of Shopify. Brilliant service. You know, I get asked a lot about whether or not we would switch out into something else, or whether we want something bespoke, and Shopify does everything we need and more. Brilliant platform.
And I heard a rumor you built a site in a day. Is that right? Well, near enough.
Worse than that. So my partner built it in 2 hours in a pub, actually, a pub in Victoria Station in London. Yeah.
The headlines just get better and better. Built in a pub in 2 hours, £2 million a month, I think you're doing, aren't you, or something
Yeah,
ridiculous?
yeah.
And 3,000, just dum 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 dum. And I also hear, you're like, what's he going to say next? What's he going to say next? But you're very much focused on the sort of virtual side of things with your team as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, we're a completely virtual team.
which I think, in light of the sort of situation that we're in right now with COVID-19, obviously a lot of people, well, everybody, pretty much, not everybody, but 99% of the population sat at home. Obviously, I'm guessing you're at home right now while we're chatting.
Yep.
I think virtual working remotely, should I say? What sort of things could you say about that, or recommend about that? Tools, the way that you communicate with your team.
Yes, I think so we use WhatsApp a lot.
Yeah.
So we tend not to do a lot of, like, I hear lots of people are doing Zoom meetings and stuff
Yeah.
like that. We tend to use WhatsApp basically because it lets people contribute when they are most engaged. So for me, the problem with meetings, back in office life was always, you've got one person who's worried about their cat because it's sick. You've got one person that's got a cold. You've got one person that, is really hungry. And none of those people are getting together at the same amount, at the same time, to be super productive in the right way, because everybody's schedule is different. So we do kind of really weird meetings where people can contribute when they have and they are inspired to say something around it. So we'll start a WhatsApp group on a subject and someone will write something, and maybe nobody writes anything for 8 hours, and then you'll have 3 people that contribute at once. And find actually meetings like that get much better results because everybody's contributing when they're super passionate and thinking about it, and have put the effort in, rather than just going, I don't care because, like, I'm hungry, so I'm not going to contribute.
I'm not even there. I'm just thinking of whatever. I'm on my mobile or whatever. Whereas they've got the time to then respond.
To think about it.
Yeah.
So I think it's not just about, creating virtual versions of things that you used to do in an office. It's about going, where can the virtual tools help me to do things in a different way and make sure that people are productive in a way that's good for them and not just for you or the person that's holding the meeting.
Okay. So you spend a lot of your time working from home then, or are you go to the warehouse, the sort of logistics side of things, or are you
so go to the warehouse, sometimes spend the vast majority of time working from home or whatever hotel is designated home at the moment, because there's a lot of traveling to do with managing the supply chain and everything as well. So I tend to work almost entirely off my phone as well, rather than using a laptop, which I find really helpful, because there's pretty much nothing you can't do on your phone now, which is great.
Another one for the headline. So we've got mobile, 2 hours.
Yeah, we're weird. We genuinely like to do things differently. So we've kind of got a motto, which is, if you want extraordinary results, you have to do extraordinary things. So if you're just doing the things that everyone else does, you're never really going to be better than them. At best, you're only going to be the same, right? So if you want to do things that are completely different or really push the boundaries, you need to try completely different approaches.
Brilliant thinking. So I'm thinking we've gone literally like whirlwind from 0 to 2 years. You're doing huge numbers along, obviously, and it all sounds so simple. I'm sure it's not quite that simple. So over those 2 years, going from shipping out your first pair of tights to shipping out 10 pairs of tights a day to 100 pairs of tights a day to 500, obviously there's some huge milestones there. I mean, what would be your advice to people listening in? I think, a lot of people that will listen to the podcast will be on their 100 order day or their 200 order day and aspiring to get to that, whatever their level is. There's always another level, isn't there? Whether that's, obviously everyone's got their own sort of aspirations, and whether that's order values or order numbers or square footage in their warehouse, which are unlikely to be one of those. But, how, in 2 years, you've gone from 1 order a day, to the 3,000 plus orders a day. What are some of the advice you would give out to people listening in that are sort of looking to scale?
I think there's 2 things for me, really. I think the first one is that you can never be complacent with what you've got. So as soon as you're going, oh, I've got 100 sales a day, that's great, I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, you're going to be stuck at that level just
Yeah.
from a psychological point of view. So however many orders you have coming in a day, it can never be enough. So you have to have that mindset right from the start, which is, 10,000 orders yesterday, but we could have done 12. You have to keep pushing yourself, and you can't back off in that, enjoying it, just being like, yay, I've achieved this. And it's always good to celebrate achievements, but you can't rest on your laurels for any amount of time, I think, which is hard. And I think I must annoy people a lot with that, because they're like, this is great, and I'm like, oh, but it can be greater, what more can we do?
So you've already completely forgotten about the 3,000 orders a day. You're like focused on the next.
Yeah, and you have to constantly be focused on the next set of numbers. And I think the other sorry, go on. I was just going to say that the other thing is about building an organization where change is the norm. Because if you're going to be scaling to that degree, you live in constant flux. So anybody who isn't great at living with lots of change, anyone that likes conformity and normal days that are the same every day, isn't going to work in your organization. You have to build it to be an organization that is constantly in flux, with people that love being in flux all of the time.
Having the key people in the business being very, very strong at change and adapting, and knowing that we will never, same as yourself, very, very key that those people are able to adapt very quickly and know that 3,000 orders, we'll celebrate for 2 minutes, but Brie's going to want 10,000 or whatever that number is. So that warehouse has got to grow, the team's got to grow, because there's so many things, isn't there? Obviously within that business, you've got, obviously there's a marketing one thing, but if we just sidestep that for a second, you've got that whole logistics, warehouse, team, people, recruitment, there's just so many moving parts, obviously within an organization that's doing that amount of orders. That recruitment, have you got any sort of tips on recruitment for the guys that are listening in that are, trying to get key people in their organization?
So I think with recruitment, again, we always start by asking our customers. So, with absolutely everything we do, we start at that point. So if you've got somebody out there who's already a massive fan of your brand, and you bring them into any role, they're going to love being there a lot more than someone that's never heard of you. So, we always go out to our customers first with anything like that. And we've got lots of hires who are people who were customers first and also have these amazing skills in different areas. And you get somebody who inherently understands your brand, but also, loves working there, because it's, it's a little bit of a kind of dream for them. It's something that they've wanted to do. And I think that makes it a lot easier to cope with how difficult and stressful stuff can be sometimes.
Yeah, understood. Okay, so what would you say would be your sort of biggest tips for people that are listening in that are looking at starting a brand? They're literally just starting out. They're just thinking of starting, whatever it may be, to build a brand. What will be a good start point?
I think that the first thing is to have product market fit. And, that it seems really obvious and stupid, but the amount of people that I talk to who are like, I've got this great idea, and it's a great idea that's relevant to one person, one day a year, every 5 years. And you're like, that's not going to make a brand. I think for me, there's a concept of dwell time, which is how long a person spends engaging with your brand. So, if you're wearing a pair of tights, somebody wears those for 8 hours a day, that's a high amount of dwell time with your brand. So your brand is important. They're thinking about you every day. You need to do that. If you sell, for example, a travel neck pillow that you use once a year, your brand is much less important in that sale, because it's much more a product-based sale. So I think you need to understand where you fit in, and neither one is good nor bad. It's just about being realistic. If you're selling, blue tack and you want to do a huge brand thing around it, you need to think, is that necessary for this type of product, or is it just about this product being better? So I think, there's that thought to go in at the start. And then I think the big one for me is actually working out how big your market size is. And this is always the bit that I do when somebody pushes an idea or asks me for their opinion of an idea, is going, who is your audience? How big is that audience? What percent of that audience do you think you can take? And how much money does that put at the maximum part of this business's worth? And a lot of time people will go through the numbers and go, actually, it's not big enough. And I think that's a really key thing. If you don't work those numbers out beforehand, you can have really unrealistic expectations, you know, of a product. And we see that a lot, for instance, in the baby market. There's about 1 million babies born every year. So, you know, your baby market is never going to be bigger than 1 million babies every year. So, you know, as much as you have aspirations for your product, that's as big as it gets. So, you know, either you think of something that you can do every one of those years. So you have, you know, 1 million babies, and then when they turn 2, you've got another product. When they turn 3, you've got another product. Or you think about 5 products that each one of those babies needs. But, you know, you have to try and put that context around it. Otherwise, you don't really understand the market for your product.
So for SNAG Tights, what's next in terms of, are you staying tights? Obviously it's SNAG Tights, but are you going to stay with tights, or have you got ideas? And well, I'm sure you've got plenty of ideas. But what is there any sort of exclusives maybe you can give us, the products that are maybe on the horizon?
So we've got lots of really interesting products coming up. We've got, over the next couple of months, something that people have been asking us for ages. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but like keep looking, because it's going to be really good. And yeah, we've got some great stuff. We're moving towards biodegradable, or doing a lot of work around biodegradable tights, and if we can make those. So there's a lot of kind of eco initiatives that we're doing, and just really focusing on markets that we're a little bit less well known in, like the States, and seeing how we can push those as well.
So pushing more the what you have already, more so, but in different. So with that said, do you think you'll ever open stores and sort of bricks and mortar type businesses? Or
I mean, it's a really, so no, for a couple of reasons. One of them is margin. Again, because we consider ourselves a co-owned brand with our customers, all our extra margin we push back into lowering our price, so we can keep our price as advantageous as we possibly can. So we don't have the margin to be able to do bricks and mortar stores. I also think that's fundamentally changing. We did a survey last year which was looking at people's shopping experiences on the high street, and 70% of people said they'd cried in the changing rooms of a store because the bricks and mortar purchase experience in fashion was just so tough. And again, that's not, you know, an area that we want to be part of. So I think it's much more about, you know, helping people have great shopping experiences in places that they're comfortable in.
So probably not then is a reality.
Yeah.
Especially in what's going on at the moment. Are you having any challenges with logistics at the moment, getting 3,000 orders a day out? Is that starting to bite at all at the moment?
We are. I think we're lucky. We've got quite a good stock holding, but we are seeing a kind of reduction in demand at the moment, just as people sort themselves out, really. And I think you kind of can't push that stuff. You know, this is a scary time for people. You know, they're living life, you know, their living experience of life is so different from normal. You just need to give people the space to, you know, deal with what they have to deal with, and try and do your bit. So we've got a great scheme at the moment where we're giving free tights to NHS frontline workers. And we're also just doing loads of stuff to try and entertain people at home. So craft projects, you know, great music lists, you know, happy kind of, you know, interesting projects and photography things people can do, and really just trying to you know, keep people happy and amused. They've supported us, so at this time where it's really tough for people, we want to be there to support them.
I think that's brilliant. I think it's so important now, isn't it? Right now, you see the brands that are doing it right, which a lot are, you know, and obviously trying to contribute and help. And then you see the odd thing that's just like, whoa, you know, that's really going to damage, you know, in the long run, when all's said and done, everything's going to go back to normal. And it is. It might not feel like it to some people right now, but it will. It's just a matter of how many how many sleeps or how many weeks, and it'll go back to normal. But obviously, some brands will flourish, and they will flourish very well because of the way that they represent themselves over this time, whereas others obviously will not. It'll be an interesting. I think it'll be a very interesting sort of 3-6 months to see, what brands are doing, how they're reacting. I think over this last week, there's been a lot of very quick stuff that's not very good, or just very it's just not very honest, I think, or it's just doesn't represent brands at all. Whereas I think, as you say, I think you just got to take a bit of a breath and think, hang on a minute, how can we help? What can we do? Give them, so we can entertain them. I think it's brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Brie. So I think final question for you. I always like to end on a book recommendation for my podcast listeners. So what would your book recommendation be?
So my favourite book is Frank Herbert's June, and I think everybody should read it. I think it's particularly interesting at times of crisis and when people are feeling, a little bit off kilter. It's it's really about how you triumph over adversity, and when things are completely bleak, how you can keep going. And for me, that's just a bit of a Bible for life, but I think it's particularly important just now.
So it's one to reread then for yourself, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Bedside cabinet job, yeah. Frank Herbert's June.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, we'll get that on the list. Brilliant. Well, so for the guys that are listening in that want to find out more about you, Brie, obviously you've got SNAG Tights. Is there anywhere specifically guys can find out more about you over and above that?
So I'm on Instagram as Brie from Snag, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for being on the podcast, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you.
No problem.